Today I want to briefly discuss food security risk factors. And these are very important when we're talking about biomes, because of course we're not looking at biomes just as physical environments or natural environments on Earth. We're looking at biomes as environments in which both there is a natural flora and fauna set, it is affected by climate, and it is a place in which human beings must live, have always lived, and as long as we live on this planet, will continue to live. So therefore, there is always a compromise between environment, or the biome, and human society, and the two interact. We affect our biome, and we are affected by it. Let's have a look at some ideas around food security, because this is one of the oldest drives or imperatives of humanity. The idea that we must have access to a food supply. The ideas discussed today have been derived from Oxford Big Ideas, Science Alert, and material provided by The Independent in the United Kingdom. There are 6 threats to food security, and I'll discuss them very briefly today. You can also read the scripts and think about these as you undertake your own biomes assignment. The first one is water security, and there is a lack of water security, or if you like, there is water scarcity. There is not enough access to clean and safe water that people can use. Now, as it states here, of course, safe water is important, primarily for us to drink, but also, of course, to grow crops. Without enough water to grow crops, agriculture cannot survive, and without agriculture, much of human society would starve. So why is there a scarcity? Well, just like economics, scarcity means that there is not enough of a resource to go around or to satisfy different calls upon it. In this case, we're not talking about wants and needs for water, but rather conflict between different groups that want access. On one side, we have the farming and manufacturing communities, if you like, producers. So local farmers need water for crops. Producers and manufacturers, companies like Coca-Cola, need large amounts of water to create their product, and also to clean equipment and to clean surfaces and containers. Households also need water. That's another side. Households need water. We need water, of course, to drink, to cook, to wash, and a key aspect of all human life. So households or individuals need it. And then, of course, there's the environment has a need for water. And one of the ideas around that is here in South Australia, we need only look at the Murray River and the conflict between cotton growers and traditional viticulturalists and agricultural growers. We can look at the conflict between states. States are further up on the river system, Queensland and New South Wales, and those lower down, especially South Australia. We can look at the conflict, the scarcity, not enough water to flush the river, to keep the river healthy, not enough water to supply Adelaide, to provide Adelaide with water security, and finally, not enough water for agriculture. We can do one of these things, but if we do one rather than all 3 in some combination, then we will lose the resource. When you look at your biome, think of the water security within your biome. Has human behaviour affected the water supply in your biome? How important is the water supply to flora, fauna, and human society in your biome? And how does access to water affect human beings in your biome? And how have humans used water in your biome? Another threat to food security is climate change. And this is, of course, when we're talking about, and it's very much a topical discussion now, the changes in world weather patterns triggered by greenhouse gases, human consumption and expulsion of commercial carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, raising the temperature and insulating the planet. And this affects both temperature and rainfall around the world. And what we're seeing, or what we're being told about, are longer term droughts that last longer, impact on weather patterns around the world. El Nino and La Nina, the two weather patterns which affect hot spells and dry spells around the world. How does it affect us in Australia? If you're looking at South Australia, how are we affected by changing weather patterns? Will human societies have to stop farming in some areas and move down to or up to other areas? Will fertile areas become barren as global temperature increases? And with that loss of fertility, what will happen to our food supply? What will happen to our food security? So think about how that impacts your environment. Changing world. And an example is what is happening to creatures in the Arctic. Just one example where we see rising temperatures affecting the tundra and the polar regions in the northern hemisphere, and this is creating a food security issue for large carnivores, or for all carnivores, especially the polar bear at the top of the food chain, but it also affects further down as these animals come further south and consume more and more food, including fish. So that affects hunters and indigenous, the Inuit people who rely on fish. So they can no longer find the fish because they're being consumed by sea lions and polar bears. And also they struggle to get into the areas because of the danger posed by polar bears increasing their range further south. Result, reduced food supply in Arctic indigenous communities. Another threat to food security is that which arises from non-native plants, animals and insects. And these are plants and animals and insects that are brought into an area either intentionally or unintentionally. And they can have a destructive effect on the natural environment and also lead to food security risks. The example here is the cupra beetle, which you can do some research on and look at its abundance in Southeast Asia. Here in Australia, though, we only need to look at creatures like the cane toads, but also wild horses in South Australia, or cloven animals that have impacted the physical features of the land, eaten away, damaged surface areas, therefore destroying the solidity of the soil and leading to soil erosion. And at the same time, when we get that soil erosion, we of course lose farming land. So there's one example, but there are also other risks, plants and animals and insects, and they're not just terrestrial. The star of thorns starfish, which has affected ships' ballasts, which have moved around the world. I want to move on now to, and here we have an image of what it's like to experience a plague. Large plagues can rip through areas and destroy months' worth of crops within a matter of hours, and leaving an entire population destitute because they don't have great food security. They didn't have it before the locust plague or other plague of creatures hit, and they certainly don't have it after. Competition for land. One of the key factors that concerns many people is the conversion of farming land into land for biofuels. This is especially apparent in Central and South America, where land is being taken out of farming agricultural produce and being used to grow, especially corn, which is a widely used replacement for petroleum fuel. Most of your cars can run on it today. We call it ethanol. And the problem is, though, that as we take more land out of agricultural production to go to biofuel production, so the food supply around the world drops. And this can be a growing issue. Another issue with land competition is the use of land for housing, for mines, to extract precious minerals and ores, for relaxation and recreation, golf courses, for retail and factories, and of course expanding human populations. So this has become a considerable issue, because when we're using land for these other purposes, we are not using it directly for the growing of crops, and therefore we're reducing that factor in production, that resource of agriculture, land. And let's just have a look. This is taken from the UK website, which I mentioned earlier, The Independent. And it shows you places in Africa where governments have halted food production and replaced land used for food production with production of biofuels. And these biofuels often make their way around the world. They're considered more environmentally friendly because they don't involve petroleum, but in fact they are just as damaging with the impact on human societies, in that people lose access to food, they lose access to farming land. Another point to consider with the use of land for biofuels is the clearing of natural environments to create biofuels, and we see this in the Amazon, and we see this in other parts of the world where flora and fauna are being eradicated, so that biofuels and other generally cheap replacement crops are being planted, costing us biodiversity. But of course, here I'm primarily talking about food security. The last one aspect of food security, the last threat, if you like, is armed conflict and war between societies. And this one's pretty self-explanatory. We see armed conflict and wars around the world as soldiers enter an area. Very few, except in very well organised countries, most armies do not organise their own food. They do not take their own food with them. They scour, they pillage the local environment, and they take whatever they can find. And if that's food from a village or from a family's table, there is no compulsion. If the only thing that a family experiences is a loss of food, that in some situations can be the least of their problems. Occupying forces, even your own nation's forces, can be incredibly brutal to civilian populations. Conflict and wars can also see the destruction of farmland, with the planting of mines and the work of artillery pieces destroying the topography, the surface of the land, destroying terraced areas and cratering land. And of course, getting back to the mines, there is that great danger, of course, that if mines are laid, then for many years after, the local populations, after the war has apparently ended, local populations are subjected to the effect of landmines, with peasant farmers often dying in their thousands, dying and being maimed. Good examples of these can be found in places like Vietnam, which is still suffering from the use of cluster bombs. We also see young men generally, but also children who may have harvested crops previously, are now drawn, often forced, into joining the army or joining the fighting. And when they are away, it means that they cannot harvest, they cannot plant, tend or harvest crops, again reducing the food supply. Conflict may also make regions and areas unsafe for non-combatants, which forces tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people around the world to leave their homes and become refugees. And invariably, the thing they leave behind is their access to fixed food sources, such as the local farm. I'd like you to think about these 6 threats to food security. Think about the questions I pose at the bottom of these slides and discuss them in relation to your chosen biome in your presentation. Thank you.